Hi, this is Andrew Sears again, and I'm going to go into the next section of talking about innovation in Christian higher education. And what I want to talk about is the new business models that are emerging, and most of these are based around unbundling and rebundling in Christian education. And just to kind of recap what we talked about, the basic idea is that degrees today, or up to now, have been monolithic bundled. So you can think of that as this toy, the Tonka truck. You can't really take it apart. But where degrees are going is they're going to be built on modular standards, and it's going to be unbundled. Now, unbundled programs really aren't that useful, but what you can do is you can reassemble them, and the analogy is with Lego kits. And then those Lego kits can be combined into Lego cities, which you might say would be modular universities, and the Lego kits would be like modular degrees. So with that kind of mindset, and just using this analogy with Legos, what you can do is you can build all sorts of types of business models. And I've talked with hundreds of people and kind of surveyed the industry, and there's been a few business models that have emerged as common. So, just to recap again, the idea is that there's 4 components to a degree. I mean, you could break it up into more. Transformative experience, access to opportunity, metacognition, and skills and knowledge and acquisition. And what you can do is you can take these different Lego bricks here, these different squares, and you could reassemble them into different value propositions to different customer groups. And that's really what the whole of this unbundling and rebundling strategy is. So let me go into the models, and I'm going to start with one that's fairly common. One of the big issues for Christian higher education is that there's a lot of students that attend secular universities. So how do Christians respond? Well, what they've done is they've responded with campus groups like Cru, or formerly Crusade, Campus Crusade, Intervarsity. And what they're doing is they're taking this existing university, and they're basically trying to provide a bundle. They're trying to integrate as strongly as they can with that by having a Christian campus group and trying to get the local church connected in there. And some of the advantages of that are that Christians can achieve higher access to opportunity. Harvard is going to provide higher access to opportunity. And some people say we should only have Christian higher education, but I believe that you need both models. So it avoids abandoning secular academia. Now, one of the challenges is that we all know that Christians in secular universities are more likely to lose their faith. But InterVarsity and this type of model is a way to help that not happen. Now, in terms of, for each of these sections, what I'm going to do is go through the pros, the cons, and a gap analysis, basically like what's the missing components if we really wanted to support this model. The gap analysis of what I would say is right now this model is really only thinking about how do you integrate the pastoral component. That's the transformative part. But I would say there's other components. Now that you have unbundling, you could start to have Christian courseware be a part of that. So as students go to college, they could go through InterVarsity, but you could also have them take courses that are available online. You could integrate in missions trip and ministry volunteering. And part of what you could also do is you could try to get articulation agreements for Christian courses. These could transfer, covering some of the electives and programs. So I think if we were able to do that, you would have a much more competitive ecosystem that could work with Christian campus groups. So the second model is one that I've already talked about, which is the concept of a microcampus. And there, in most cases, it would be a church or a ministry becoming a microcampus. We've worked with a number of ministries in doing this. And let me just talk through the different components, how you're assembling those. So you have a church, and the church doesn't have the capacity to create its own university, but it could create a few courses. So what they're going to do is they are going to create their own courses. That's the local ministry teaching. Then they're going to maybe add in some MOOCs and apps to help educate people. They might use some Christian courseware. So say they want to, teach a business program. They could use Sailor Academy's business program for 2 years of college. Then they could use Christian courseware to provide some of the Bible college. And then they might even use, other Christian college courses. And the idea is the whole thing is going to be assembled into a Lego kit. So you're going to have a Christian worldview. They might be doing an internship or practicum at their church. There would be a component that provides alternative access to credit, so the MOOCs could get credit. You might, create some articulation agreements if needed. And then the transformative experience is really happening at the church. So you have a microcampus at the local church. So you have that local community, you have a small group, you have courses that are focused on transformation, and you have mentoring. And the idea is that after that, someone could go straight into a job, or they could go into a secular or Christian university graduate school. In many cases, a church-based degree may not have the brand recognition, but if you're able to quickly convert that into a better branded grad school, then that could help address that, but it also could provide that this is more affordable. So some of the pros of this model is you can provide a complete Christian undergraduate education while having ministry involvement. I believe that megachurches could have a really strong offering here. Megachurches now have campuses that are as big or bigger than many Christian campuses, and they have a community that in many cases can be as strong as a Christian college community. Now, the main con is these new schools won't have the access to opportunity, so their brand won't be as recognized. Now, in terms of the gap analysis, and why don't I talk about some of the examples? So unbundled examples, Cache Global, Virtues Campus, Foundation University, those are all trying to provide this in an unbundled way where they're reassembling the components. Then there's more traditional examples. So Southeastern University has 50, what I'd call microcampuses, where they're partnered with largely megachurches across the country. And there's a number of other schools that are doing that. And then there's also growing secular models. So Kepler, Minerva, Coursera, where they basically create these microcampuses. And the gap analysis really is you need scale for the organizations pursuing this model. Most of these organizations are proof of concept, and you need established training and framework for microcampuses. Everyone's reinventing the wheel. How do we help them so that they're all learning from each other and not reinventing the wheel? The third model is very similar to the second model, except the idea is instead of trying to get people to go to a bachelor's program, what you're going to do is you're going to say, you know what, we're just going to do a Christian associate's degree. And then we're going to transfer to either a secular or Christian university. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, you know what, my church is going to be an alternative to community college. So rather than transferring, having our students who go to a community college that might have some of the same issues with, other secular campuses, we're going to integrate with our church. So one of the advantages of this over the previous model is that you get improved access to either a better branded Christian university or secular university. The downside is, as they go to the secular university, they might lose their faith, or if they go to a Christian university, they're probably going to have to pay a lot more. And then the other downside is that you're going to lose integration between years. If you go to a Christian university, they're going to have an integrated product, a strongly integrated product across all 4 years. Whereas, to do it this way, you're going to have a less integrated product between the first 2 and the last 2 years. So some of the needs would be to create articulation agreements with universities, get more courses and organizations focused on this model, to establish a framework. Right now, City Vision is doing this with our associate's degrees. There's secular examples out there. Straighter Line, they have about 10,000 students going through where they're transferring them to other schools. So that's the third model. The fourth model is what I'm calling an unbundled online degree completion university. So degree completion schools have been around for a long time, but they really haven't been designed to work with unbundled programs. In the majority world, these are called top-up degree programs, and the idea is that you could have people build the first part of their programs based on MOOCs, apps, Christian courseware. They might get some Christian college courses, and they would do transfer credit, and they might get industry certifications and other ways to have alternate credit. But the idea is you're going to design this so that you can get an end-to-end kind of Christian worldview. And what this can do is, so City Vision's program, we have a 4-year program where the total cost is $5,000. So provides very affordable, convenient Christian education as the last few years of the program. The main con is you have limited transformation because this is an online model, and sometimes you might be able to do online and blended, but you have limited transformation because you have a lack of physical community. So I would say that the gap analysis, for City Vision, we're trying to scale ultimately. We can drive down our costs to do that. The examples in the secular space are groups like Thomas Edison and Excelsior that basically specialize on alternative education for adults in degree completion. Now, a fifth model is, I've talked with a number of Bible colleges and theological institutes, and they would actually like to expand to offer other degrees or possibly launch online courses. So the question is, how do they do this? And in the past, they would have to basically create all the components themselves. So they either have the capacity or they don't. But in an unbundled world, what they can do is they can combine Legos for this. So what I'm showing here on the left is the traditional college. That operates the way it's been operating. You still have your traditional theology and Bible school. But what you can do is you can take a bundle of the traditional college and you can combine that with unbundled components. So you could say, let's have anywhere from 1 to 3 years just taking the same theology and Bible courses. And then what you can do is you can create a few courses that you develop. Say you want to add a business program to your theology school. So you might develop some, 1 or 2 courses where you integrate, theology into business. But then you also might use some Christian courseware that does that. You might use some MOOCs and apps like Sailor Academy's business program. And then the idea is you're going to design the whole thing into a Christian worldview. You're going to use some things along the lines of alternative credit. But one advantage of this is that you also have a campus experience. So your students could get the transformative experience on campus, or you could, use this this model. So this model, I think, primarily would be to how do you add other programs to students who are on campus, but it also could be used, say, a Christian theological institute wants to add an online program. Now, traditionally, what they'd have to do is they'd have to create 120 hours of online programs. But what they could do is they could use Christian courseware and, put that under their accreditation, like Third Millennium, and that could provide, a year or 2 of their curriculum, and then they could design the last year. So that's another way. So one of the advantages of this is that there's just decreased cost to become a Christian university and online college to add degrees beyond theology and Bible. The con is that, outsourcing content means there's going to be less contextualization, there's going to be probably less integration, and there's going to be limited languages available in the courseware. So, I would say the big gap analysis is training schools on how do you make this change. It's one thing to train a school how do you build a Bible institute. It's another thing to train them how to do it online. And it's completely another thing on how do you build that using unbundled components. There's very few people in the world that understand how do you do that in unbundling. And ultimately what's needed are some pilot models, and I'm in conversations with some schools where we might look to do that. The sixth model is what I would call Christian educational outsourcing, consulting, and often this is bundled with another market or model that but in the Christian case, it's almost always together, a multi-sided courseware market. Now, let me explain that. So many universities, just like in the previous diagram, say, I want to add another degree, but they just don't have the capacity to add that degree. So what they're going to do is they have their vertically integrated, program. So they're going to take the university courses, university faculty and services, university degree, university experience. But then what they're going to do is they're going to work with a consultant, and the consultant is going to bring in courseware, some that they developed, some that's developed by partner schools. So in many cases, so you have these partner schools, and it might be an alliance of 30 different schools that all contribute courses, and then they can share each other's courses. They could integrate in third-party courseware like Third Millennium, and then there's a question of, does the university provide their faculty, or do they outsource the faculty? Does the university provide its student services, or do they outsource that? Do they design the program, or do they outsource that? And all of that could be, ultimately outsourced. And in many cases, you'll have groups like Lumerit. I think they've already worked out agreements with ABHE and TRACS and some accreditors, so that if, a course is approved, by one institution within that accreditor, it can be used by other institutions. So what that does is it allows you to use other people's components. So, the advantage of this is it's decreased startup cost. It's, I would say it's very effective for low volume courses. If you just need to offer one or, students, maybe you have 1 to 5 students that are going to take this course a year, you don't want to invest all the cost it takes to create that course, but then you could offer them that by being one of a part of these networks. You can bring in outside expertise. Many of these outsourced vendors will also help with student recruitment. The con is often it increases your per student cost, and you become more dependent on outside expertise. And there's examples in the Christian space. The two main ones are Lumerit, which used to be called Knowledge Elements, and Bible Mesh. And then in the secular space, there's a number of companies: Pearson, Wiley, Bisque, Learning House, Academic Partnerships, 2U. And some of those secular organizations are, $100 million, billion-dollar companies, and operate major, programs. So ultimately, I would say the biggest gap analysis is scalable, cost-effective, multi-sided courseware markets. There's no reason why the courseware market has to be bundled with a consultant, but right now in the Christian space, that's the only way that it's worked out. So that's a whole nother model. Model 7, I think, actually is going to be one of the most disruptive, and that is Christian digital subscription services and lifelong learning. So here what you're talking about is you're going to offer Christian courseware by subscription. And right now this is offered by Logos Mobile Ed, Christian University Certificates.org, and then in the secular space you have groups like lynda.com and Great Courses. And what they're doing is they're saying, for $10 a month or $20 a month, you get access to our full library. And they're not just providing courses, they're providing complete program design. And today, right now, they don't have paths to alternative credit, but I think within the next year or two, most of those are going to get alternative credit. So I think what you're going to start to see is you're going to start to see local churches that they actually make this program as a part of their church, and they say, we're going to bundle Logos Mobile Ed or Christian University Certificates to be a discipleship program of our church, and these people will pay their $10 or $20 a month, and we're going to actually offer that as an alternative to college, and they're going to get credit, and for $10 or $20 a month, you got a competitive alternative to college. So you're talking about $200 to $500 a year. Now, along with that is another category I'm calling Christian digital subscriptions. So there you have other examples. Right now, media is the best example. Churches are starting to subscribe to that. It's basically digital materials and videos for small groups. But I think that, there's other groups: Dove, PureFlix, UpFaith, Jelly Telly, iBethel TV, Parables TV, and there's actually some Christian game subscriptions. I think that those might start to become a part of this bundle also. A lot of churches are starting to subscribe to Right Now Media, and all of a sudden this church can become a competitor and offer degrees for $200 to $500 a year, which I think will be another interesting model. Now, the eighth model is also interesting. So part of what happens in dual enrollment, part of what happens in unbundling, is the barrier between high school and college essentially goes away. All these barriers go away. The barrier between church and college, all these barriers go away. So, when do you start college? There's no reason why to not start that sooner. I talked with the founder of Western Governors, which is, really the largest unbundled university in the United States. And they said their largest growth group right now is high school juniors and seniors. And these are overachieving students that their parents want them to go, and they graduate high school having, 2 or 3 years worth of college credit. And I talked to a parent who she had both of her kids only take, in one case it was half a year of college, and the other was a year of college, and then they went straight to grad school. So what it does is it shortens the time of the bachelor's, allowing faster access to graduate school that might provide higher access. So you might get a degree that the brand of that degree isn't going to be, that well established, but then if you go to grad school at a state school or a high-end Christian university, then you're able to get much more recognition. The downside is this does put a lot of pressure on high school students, but I think there's a big plus. The gap analysis, ultimately you need to have organizations that scale to pursue this model, to have established training and frameworks, possibly to have especially training into Christian colleges. So there's groups out there, Credits Before College, Verity College Education, Lumerit, and then most Christian colleges will have dual enrollment programs. But I would say this is going to become another model. Now, what's interesting is there's several secular models, and I call these secular models even though Christian can be working with these, but I think these are going to be the main alternatives to these Christian models. One is Western Governors University and similar CBE programs. So I talked to someone who they had gone through YWAM, and they had been working in YWAM for 20 years. They had all the skills. So the competency-based education seemed like a really good path for them, because within a year and less than $5,000 they could get a degree. Now let me explain to you what these groups do. So Western Governors, they say we're just not going to offer a transformative experience. We're serving adults. They've already been transformed. That's not what we're about. What we're going to do is we're going to outsource as much as we can. We're going to use paid courseware where we can. We're going to do credit by exam or competency evaluation. Then we're going to unbundle the faculty with course mentors, student mentors, evaluators. And then we're going to increase access to opportunity by offering a degree, but we're also going to offer them as many industry certifications along the way, documented competencies and credits by exam. So now the idea is a lot of Christians are saying, wow, this is really attractive. For $5,000, I can get a fairly well-established brand degree, and I'll just reassemble my own components of that. I'm going to go to a local church. I might even add in Christian courseware. Now, the main con for this on the Christian side is there's really no mechanism to integrate the Christian components. And in a competency-based world, any Christian education is essentially going to be an added cost to a stripped-down unbundled model, because the Christian education components really aren't the competencies that these groups are using. So in terms of the gap analysis and need, I think it would actually be helpful to have Christian courseware targeting this market, and potentially churches that support this market, so that there actually is a better integration between the two. The second model is very similar, coding boot camps. The idea there on coding boot camps is typically these will take very high capacity, high intelligent individuals that may have gotten a degree in the wrong field and they're having a hard time getting a job, and what they do is they retrain them. That's not always the case, but I would say that in the vast majority. And what they're doing is they will put someone through a 6-month boot camp, and they generally have 95 to 99% placement rates and jobs ranging from $60,000 to $80,000 a year starting. And what they are doing is they're taking the most current, highest demand content from top practitioners. They're putting them in a mentored environment, 40 to 60 and maybe even 80-hour weeks is the boot camp idea. And then they already have ties with employers that, essentially in many of these, they say, if you do this and you complete it, then you're going to get a job. It's guaranteed, or you get your money back. So they have a brand, groups like Google or Microsoft or others that just need programmers. They have a brand for recruiting raw brain power. So they're able to place people in jobs. Now the con on this is the same as the previous model. There's no mechanism to integrate Christian components, and Christian education is an added cost. What this is, and even the previous model is using Clayton Christensen's framework of what job are you trying to solve. This is someone who is smart, might have a credential, but they want what's the fastest way that I can get a high-paying job. And learning Christian elements to that isn't going to be the fastest. That's going to slow them down. So again, the gap analysis is the same as before. Christian Courseware targeting this model, churches supporting this model. So the third model is actually pretty similar to the first two models, but more focused on the majority world. So the way the majority world is doing this is they have a competency-based framework, generally that is called some sort of vocational qualification system. And there you usually have different levels. Each year is basically its own competency-based exam. Level 3 is freshman, level 4 is sophomore, level 5 is junior, and then you usually get a degree through a top-up bachelor's degree. And right now, the pro of this is it's a cost-effective way for Christians to get credentials needed for job. The con is that there's no mechanism to increase or integrate Christian components. And part of what we're doing with City Vision is we're actually saying, why don't we be the last year of that program? And I think that's also a part of the solution. So this is a lot of different business models. I've gone through them very quickly. I think these are going to be the things that's going to change the world. Whenever people talk about disruption, it's going to be the fact that customers are going to find these business models a lot more attractive. Right now, they're not that popular, but once they get popularized, they're going to become much more dominant. So what are some of the principles of these business models that Christians can consider? The first one is that the effectiveness of a rebundled business model will depend on the strength of the integration between components. So some of these are probably going to fail because the integration between the components is not very good. I've worked with Sailor Academy and seen how they rebundle with other groups. And the rebundling really isn't a bundle. It's almost like assemble your own car. And if it's as complex as assembling your own car, most people aren't going to assemble their own car. If it's as complex as assembling your own furniture, then you might do it if you have good instructions. So another example of problematic integration is if you look at what's the primary strength of groups like Intervarsity and Campus Crusade. Well, it's because they're integrated on campus and they have strong community there. But a lot of these other things just aren't going to have that stronger community. You might have churches. I mean, right now with secular universities, anyone can go to a church, but the church isn't that strongly integrated with the secular university. So as you have Christian courseware and as you have secular courseware, how do you get the integration between those? Christian accounting, and right now people might say, oh, you can't use secular courseware. Well, we're already using secular textbooks. Say for accounting or math or whatever. So it's not that big of a leap to go to secular courseware, but you have to do added work to get the integration to happen. The second thing is, I think that megachurch microcampuses could become the dominant rebundling business model for Christian transformation, and might be the biggest competitor for Christian higher education. They have campuses, they have communities that rival Christian higher education institutions, and I think that the courses are actually going to be fairly easy for them to add in if they decide that they want to do it. But I think that they're going to understand that actually with their clients, rather than, or not clients, with their parishioners, rather than sending them off somewhere else where they lose, tithe-paying person, the person might lose their faith. It might be better to keep them there, and they can, develop revenue. This third point, some people will assemble unbundled components on their own, but most will prefer to buy pre-designed bundles like Lego kits. So, most kits these days, Lego makes the vast majority of their money off their kits, not just the generic bricks, and then, kids make things with their generic bricks. So, the other thing is mashups between business models will be common. So you'll take part of one business model, part of another business model. Whenever my kids work with Legos, they'll take, the parts of Spider-Man and put them on the Incredible Hulk, and that's what you'd call a mashup. So there's going to be a lot of these mashups out there. The next point is, in an unbundled world, getting people to pay for bundled Christian transformation and Christian higher education may be more challenging. They're going to look at, I can get, almost the same education from someone for $200 a month, or $1,000 for a year. Is the transformation you're providing me, worth the difference? And then the last thing I think is, what will be the dominant business models for Christian higher education in an unbundled world? I think that's yet to be determined. So, there's a lot of experiments going on, what market share these various business models will have relative to traditional Christian higher education. That remains to be seen. My guess is that in 20 years, these business models combined will have significantly larger market share combined than traditional higher education. But which of those will emerge as the dominant remains to be seen. So hopefully you found this helpful, and I'll continue to go through some of this analysis in other presentations. Thanks.